John Nelson, and you're listening to the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, this is a show, the show, for complete athletic development. The objective here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Chris Scarborough. What's up, man? How are you?
Good afternoon, guys.
Guys, if you're new to the show, welcome. Appreciate you joining. We operate a little different than your standard show. We actually have multiple shows within our show. So the first thing you're going to hear from us is going to be a bi-weekly Q&A episode. It's where Chris and I will take the questions you submit to us, and we'll tackle them there. Chris, where can they submit the questions?
On Instagram, Fast and Agile 49.
Yep. You can submit them to Chris, or you can send them to me at Farmer John ELP, but you should probably send them to Chris because I'm not good at checking my messages. You can hit us up on Instagram for that, and we'll tackle it there. Second episode you'll get from us is a guest interview. That's like every other podcast on the planet. That's where we're going to bring in our friends and colleagues from across the country, and they're going to share their stories of success, what they do with their clients, their athletes, their patients, and their gyms and practices. And just they'll give you guys tools to win as well. And like I always say, it's these individuals, they share the same core values and mission that we do. And so it's just important that they do that because we want to make sure you guys know that like these are people we trust and people in the industry that are going to provide value and provide you great information that you can apply, basically instantly. So we actually have a guest interview today, and we'll bring our guest on in a minute. But the final episode you'll get from us is going to be a guest interview. That's going to be once a quarter. We got a little behind on that. We've been talking about it. We had some audio issues and lost an interview or two. But hopefully right around the winter here, we'll be able to get a couple of our college athletes back for Christmas break, and they're going to share their stories of just how they've gone through either mine or Chris's system, the success they found there, the challenges they found there, and how it influenced and impacted their game. So I think it's going to be a pretty cool segment. I think we have a lot of young coaches, but we have a lot of athletes that listen to this show as well, obviously, and high school kids as well. And so I think it's going to be really cool for them to see how some of these older athletes, went through those developmental phases and grew and made it to the next level. So those are the episode breakdowns. We also, guys, we do not run ads on the show, so we do ask that you please, if you support this mission, if you find value in what we're providing, share the show and just bring us a friend. It's really that simple. Just share the show, bring us a friend, and help support the mission. That's really all we ask. I don't think that's too much. So I think that's all the housekeeping. Did I miss anything, Chris?
I think you got it all. No, that was great.
Cool. All right, well, let's rock and roll, man. So without further ado, pleased to welcome a good friend and mentor, the founder of New Athlete, Ryan Paul. What's up, man?
Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, guys, for having me. What's up,
Absolutely.
Chris?
Absolutely. It's good to have you back again. As I said, we had an episode about a year ago, and shockingly, we had audio issues. So
that never happens. That never happens. Just you, Ryan. Just you. That's it, man.
Seems to be the theme. So,
I'll take it any way you want me to.
Well,
man, so glad you're able to do this.
Yeah, we had Tony holler on 3 times before we actually got it right. So that makes you feel any better, Ryan? Yeah.
I just met Tony like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you had you spoke at the USR. Was it the USR conference?
Yeah, Tony did. I didn't.
Oh yeah. No, he's awesome, man. He's a brilliant man. He's a great guy. But a great episode. Everything he puts out's good. So
yeah.
But
feed the cats.
Yeah, feed the cats. So a little backstory here. I want to give Ryan the credit that he is due before we dive into all this. So you guys, y'all have listened to our show for a while. A lot of the people that have influenced our careers, and I'm incredibly grateful for Ryan. I'd say of the 3 people that have influenced my career the most would be Dr. J, who you guys have met over the show, Tommy John, who we've not had on, but Tommy was a huge driver in helping me get started. But Ryan was the other one that has really given so much information, so much value to me that I just want everybody to know that I'm incredibly grateful for your mentorship, Ryan, because there's no way that we would be where we are without you dealing with all my bullshit and helping me grow as a coach. So I appreciate you very much.
Wow, thank you. I didn't know that's I didn't know that I had that type of impact, and I never known that you had any bullshit.
Yeah. So,
Come on, a little more often, Ryan. Come on a little more often. Yeah.
yeah, seriously.
Which, by the
But,
way, let me piggyback on that. I mean, years ago, when I was still getting involved with Jay Schroeder's system and what is now Evo Code, Evo Ultra Fit, as I was just beginning to look into the system, I mean, Ryan was the one who had really had just gotten started himself within the previous year. I don't know, Ryan, was this like 04, 05, somewhere in there, 2004,
Yeah, it's going to
2005?
be somewhere around there because I got involved in 02, 03, and I think it was shortly after that. I think, did you buy an ARP? I don't remember how
Yeah,
we got in touch.
yeah, I don't either. I remember how we got in touch, but you were about a year and a half ahead of me in terms of getting into that system. And then,
Yep.
of course, you and I met a couple times at the various seminars in Phoenix that they would put on
Yep.
at that time on a monthly basis. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. So let's touch on that, Ryan. I mean, give people, your background. I mean, I think of all of us that have kind of done this, like you probably have the most experience out of almost any of us. Like, how did you get involved in the Evo side of stuff and ARP and all that? What's your
Well,
backstory?
the original involvement came from the Archuleta video that's, shooting around Instagram. I see everyone's either sending it to me or,
Yeah.
reposting it.
It's like
Um,
it's like reemerged recently.
it has, and it's kind of funny that it's whoever put it out there is, I mean, thank him for it. That's great. It's back out there. Unless you have the archives for that stuff, no one has ever seen it. But that's kind of how Jay is, and that's how he operates. Is first of all, he doesn't care what other people think. He doesn't care to, have that type of stuff.
He's referring to Jay Schroeder. If you're not sure who he was mentioning.
Jay Schroeder.
Yes.
So, I see that video and, it's actually, sorry, I'll rewind. I saw the ESPN feature that was on Adam before the draft. And when I saw the type of stuff that he was doing from a training standpoint, immediately I was glued to it because it was something different than what I had ever seen. And I was in school with the inception of Bigger, Faster, Stronger. And BFS went around the country and, they would crash course coaches on how to lift and do whatever. And what I found is I ate that stuff up, but it never really made me any faster. It didn't change who I was as an athlete, but I could lift more. So, when I saw the ESPN piece, I did everything in my power to find Jay. And at the time there was no social media. So unless you knew him directly or knew any publications that he had been involved with, you were left in the dark. And then ESPN, the magazine, which I don't even think they're in operation anymore, they did an article on Dwight Freeney. And if you had ever seen that episode or that issue, Freeney is holding a 25-pound plate from the inside with the ARP probes attached to him. Now, I didn't know that the ARP was even on him, but I knew as soon as I saw those electric cords, it had to have been Schroeder. And then you dig through the article and you find out that Jay was involved with ARP program at the time. So as soon as I saw that, immediately I looked it up and got in touch with Dennis Thompson, who basically he took Therastims, rebranded it to ARP, and then what eventually became ARP Wave. But anyways, contacted Dennis, filled out there, jumped through the hoops that he wanted me to prove that I wasn't an idiot. So I bought the ARP, and then from there, you could have an upgrade in your package that you got, and that meant that you dealt with Jay. And I would say, shoot, it probably took 3 or 4 phone calls of me calling Jay, him hanging up on me, him getting disgusted with, me as a trainer before we actually had a conversation. And there were emails that were shot back and forth. And, I thought I knew what max effort was based on the conjugate idea of max effort. And that all changed once I started getting into the Evo system.
So were you already coaching at this point, or were you still an athlete?
No, I was coaching. I had been coaching the entire time. I was still going down the road of delusion, thinking that I could play. I went to a couple arena tryouts, and I made it past the first cut. The reality was I wasn't good enough. Um, but I was looking for something that was different in the training standpoint, other than bench squat clean. And I would mess with what I could see based on the ESPN piece, and then you couldn't find any YouTube really wasn't around back then. So you take what you can remember and you kind of fumble your way through it.
Yeah. By the way, I want to put a little context on this. If you've heard any of our interviews with David Buer, uh, we're talking about the same system. Just so what John and I are talking about with Ryan, we're talking about the exact same system that David was referring to. It's just that David got involved before there ever was an ARP. So before there ever was an electrical stim device. So just kind of, again, want to just put some context on that.
Okay, I don't even know who you're talking about. I've never even heard that name before.
So let's get into you're starting to change your thought process from the bigger, faster, stronger into the Evo system. Like what was that learning curve like for you, and how are you able to take that information and just start to apply it to your athletes?
Well, I think as far as the evolution of figuring out what is the best system and how to go about it, I would start off by saying that I think everything works, or I'll say this: 100% of training works, but not all training works 100% of the time. So, I could give you the worst system in the world, and if you go balls out with it, you're going to see results. But the harder that you train in that crap system, the closer you are to having your blowout in whatever that ends up being, if that makes sense. So let's assume that my movement patterns are compromised, but you put everything into that system and you see a great result. You only have so many times that you can access those poor patterns before the dam breaks, or before the system fails you and then you don't recover, or it puts you into a massive depression, or whatever you want to call. So as I'm messing around with Jay's stuff, I'm just experiencing what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that, I'm putting mass on that I hadn't done before, but it's different. And then when you start to study what truly happens on a neurological and a physiological level of isometrics, and what it does to the mitochondria, and what it does to, just you in general, especially from a growth factor standpoint, then you go, okay, well, if it's doing this to me and I'm kind of a turd, what is it going to do to some elite athletes? So, it's basically taking the same concepts that Evo had and then going, well, technically you can apply it to anything. So once you start doing that, then it's like, well, you could still take a finite movement. Let's say I'm working on auxiliaries, and then apply the same principles that Jay was bringing to the table, and you can see a tenfold result. So I think the other thing that comes out of that is, if you know how to manipulate it, you can find the fail points in the athlete, and you can overcome the deficiency of the athlete by using the system. And I don't mean do an iso extreme for 5 minutes straight. That's pretty rarefied air. But you can still figure out ways to manipulate what he would have considered entry level 3 or entry level 1. Chris, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
John, I do. So you can take those and go, I'm going to dabble a little bit with this. And then on top of that, if you have a diagnostics program like an Omega Wave, you can figure out, okay, what is my readiness? And then if I sprinkle in a little bit of this from the Evo system, does it change it for good, or does it change it for bad? And I know I'm speaking in very gray general terms, but there was a guy that I was working with, and basically he said, I want to do CrossFit, not because I want to do CrossFit, but I want to see what it does to me neurologically. And he goes into the system, and it essentially wrecked him to the point where when he would put the Omega Wave on him, he was at like a 1 to 2 on a readiness scale. So if you're familiar with the Omega Wave, basically it's a diagnostics program that taps into the Omega Wave of the brain, and it also coincides with HRV. So it's going to tell you, okay, you should not be training at all, or you're good to go. Let's rock and roll with this thing. So anyways, he comes in. 2 is a horrible score. 0 would be, you're done. Don't even go near the gym type thing. So he comes in at a 2, and we go, okay, well, technically based on this, you're done for a week and a half of training. You shouldn't even be doing anything. Just out of curiosity, let's see what happens when we start to add in some of the ultra fit, because my thinking is that as difficult as CrossFit is, it's very submaximal in nature.
Right.
So once we start to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I said I agree with you. Yes, it's very,
okay.
very hard and submaximal. Yes.
Yes, extremely difficult, which honestly, it's almost like a glorified manual labor. And if you've ever built a house or you've done just manual labor stuff, it's rewarding, but it wrecks you and you are destroyed for a day or two afterwards. Now, back to the story. So we go, okay, let's try just for out of curiosity, what happens if you execute an iso lunge for a minute, but you do it maximally? And when Jay talks about going to that nth degree, that's what he's referring to. Is it's not just a 50% contraction. It's not just holding the position for the sake of holding the position. I'm actively and I'm physiologically and emotionally and intellectually and spiritually, or whatever the pipes is, I'm blasting that thing for everything that I have. We execute that. Then we put the Omega Wave back on the athlete, and their 2 readiness jumped up to a 7, which meant it's out of, at least at the time, was a 0 to 10 scale. And I could be bastardizing that completely, but that's what I remember it to be at the time. And we only did it with this athlete on 2 different occasions. So we take him from a 2 readiness up to a 7, which meant you could train. So if we're going, okay, well, you're beat up, the program says don't train. Does it really mean that you shouldn't train, or you've been completely undertrained and you need to have your nervous system stimulated to then get into a readiness state? So with that being said, how many athletes do you have that don't want to take their warm-up serious? They want to go right to training or right to competition. And it takes a good 4 to 5 sets or 4 to 5, let's say, pickup basketball games to then reach your readiness of where you should be. Does that make sense?
Does,
yeah, it absolutely does.
So basically, I'm using the stimulation of, well, I don't want to warm up. I don't want to take care of myself. I'm going to go right into competition. And 2 games in, now I'm awake. I'm done yawning. And now I'm ready to compete. So anyways, point on that is that was the kind of the first intro into really screwing around with UltraFit. And, there were a couple times where I went and visited Jay. And I kind of knew going into it how it was going to be. There was nothing that I was going to do that was ever going to impress him. So, don't even go down that road. He's probably going to say some things and rip on you. And I think by design, that is kind of how he is. But I think at the same time, he wants to test you and push you to see, are you really about it, or are you just going to talk about it? And, I don't care if someone says something about me. That doesn't really bother me. I'm there because I want to learn and I want to know the system. And, what I went through was probably minuscule to what, say, Adam went through, or, some of these other elite athletes that he had. So anyways, that was kind of my intro.
Well, it's fascinating that you're referring to things like the Omega Wave, things that you can actually do to immediately measure, like you said, the physiologic and well, the pipe's readiness, if you will. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and it's now I'm going to use the word a simple iso extreme, but if you do an iso extreme the right way, and again, we're not just talking about position, that's a part of it, but engaging and performing it at your absolute maximal pipes effort, it's amazing the benefits and like you said, the readiness that
Yep.
it's. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But now, how
What's
many people?
crazy?
It's but how many people actually engage themselves at that level? You know that.
Very few. But okay, so I'll shift gears on here. So, are you familiar with FRC?
That's where I was
Yes.
getting ready to head. Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at how Dr. Spina, who's a chiropractor that came up with this system, how he executes really going through mobility, it kind of touches on pipes or what you were doing to execute Jay's system. In the reason I say it touches on it is that as you're going through whatever mobility you're doing, you start off at 30% per se. Then you go to 40, then you go to 50, then you go to 60, 70, 80, 90. And once you get to 100%, you have maximal tension on whatever you're trying to achieve from a mobility standpoint. And that's sniffing what you're supposed to be doing UltraFit 2 or Evo Code. UltraFit is what we understood it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is you're only doing that for 20 seconds and then you back it back down. But if you look at those practitioners that are doing that and they're doing it on a routine basis, Hunter is one of the guys that's there, or Dewey Nielsen. If you look at these guys, Hunter, I believe, was coming from a powerlifting background. I've only met him once, but these guys are rocked out, they're veined out, they almost look like they're on the sauce, but they're not. Because I just know that those guys wouldn't go down that road, and you would destroy yourself if you did. But when you go to that maximal, I don't want to say the word tension, but when you go to that maximal level of contraction systemically, see what happens to your body neurologically. See what happens to the vascularity of your limbs and other appendages. It changes it. So then if you take it to the next level of going into like Evo Code or UltraFit and you go in, okay, well, let's do an actual maximum angle isometric lunge at the level that, say, FRC would start with, but let's take the time and let's move it out to 30 seconds and let's just see what happens. Then we'll move it out to a minute, and then we'll move it out to a minute and a half, and then we'll move it out to 3 minutes. And you can start to see some crazy stuff. Now, we had one time where we were messing around with cordyceps, and we had athletes that were in an iso lunge, and about a minute 30, minute 45, they would gas out. So they have to take a deep breath and get right back in, and you start to cycle through your energy systems very fast. So what we did is we took the cordyceps, we mashed it up into a paste, we put it onto the ARP pads, and then put it onto the individual and ramped it up as high as we could. And basically we drove the cordyceps into the epidermal layer, which is the biggest organ in the body. And you could watch their times go from $1:45 to 2:30 to 3 minutes to 3:30 with some athletes. We're doing this in one session. So if you're familiar with cordyceps, it basically increases your O2 level or O2 sat in your blood. And we were essentially defying what should have happened from a physiological standpoint to these individuals.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of speechless. I'm just trying to kind of comprehend what you were doing. That's incredible.
But with that, it's that sounds cool, and it was, but you have to have an individual that has a disposition that is willing to do something they've never done before, to go somewhere they've never been.
Mm-hmm. Which is an increasing challenge in this day and age.
It is, and that's also kind of a roadblock to where I came into, because I thought in order to execute UltraFit, I had to be a complete prick to athletes because I didn't have the tools in me to pull it out of them at the time. So it basically was, all right, well, I'm going to zero in on something that can belittle them or that can spark an emotion, and I can basically force pipes to happen. And it did, and we saw some insane results. But the problem is that you either long-term affect the human in a bad way, or you destroy the relationship that you had with that individual, or both.
Yeah, and I've been there and done that, and so I think that's a really interesting point. And I think you're the only person who has kind of been through this system, whether it's been on our show, another show, whoever talks about that. But I know for me, that's something that I've experienced. How, and I think whether that is because we all take the approach, or we believe we should take the approach that Jay had, or it's just the inherent nature of the system. How did you work to get around? I don't want to say get around that. Ryan, you have an incoming call coming in. It says you stopped recording.
Yeah, sorry. I think you're recording right now. So I think the question was,
yes,
get around those roadblocks.
Yeah, how did you get around those roadblocks or improve yourself as a coach so you didn't have to be a complete prick and ruin relationships with people?
Well, I think, for me, there was a lot of things that were kind of building to a head. And, I was questioning my marriage wasn't doing well. I was questioning who I was as a man. I was questioning my career choice. I was questioning everything. And then finally, I had this kid that came in to start training. And when I saw the kid and his mom walk through the gym, I thought there's no way. The mom was very overweight. And you automatically paint this picture in your mind of there's no way that this kid is going to give me what I want. They look like they don't have money. So, you start to go down this road of judgment only to find that, holy crap, her credit card worked and they wanted to pay for the entire year up front. Well, that never happens. And then I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Let's just train the kid, see where it goes. Kid shows up every day, doesn't miss a session. And then on top of that, the kid had been arrested for burglary into one of the schools that he was around. It's like, holy smokes, he should not be training. He should probably be in a group home or something. And I know I'm jumping to, full judgment on the kid, but I'm just giving you where my mindset was at the time. And then 3 weeks into training, I get this handwritten letter on my desk that I'm the dad that he never had. And this is a second home to him, and it saved his life. And essentially that punched me in the face that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And that if I meet the athlete where they are, instead of trying to force them to what I think I want them to be, meeting them where they are and then going, just let's have a conversation and figure out why you're here. What are we doing this for? And then let's teach you how to take yourself to a level that you've never been before. Because if you say you want to play in the NFL, okay, how many boys playing football when they strap the pads on for the first time have dreams of playing in the NFL? I guarantee you every one of them does. And if they say that they don't, I think they're lying to you. At least that one time when you strap the helmet on because you emulate whoever it is, that's what you think about. I know I did. So, if an athlete comes in and you start to then go, okay, well, you want to go to the NFL. Now let's work backwards and go, well, what benchmarks can you check or what boxes can you check that warrant, okay, you have a legit shot if the stars line up. Well, I'm 5'3", I'm redheaded, and my dad's 5'7". Well, you probably have a really good chance of being a season ticket holder to go watch the NFL, but you're not going to play in the NFL. So then what you can do is kind of go, all right, well, how do you feel about coaching? How do you feel about, being a trainer? Well, no, I really want to play. Okay, but just so you understand, let's look at all the data points. You're jumping this, your size is this, your appearance is this. And you can then diffuse, I guess, you as being the prick, and the data can just tell you the kid doesn't have a chance. He's not going to make it. I know you've got baseball guys that come in and they're like, well, I want to go to the bigs, but I throw 84 miles an hour and I'm 5'8". Probably not going to happen unless, yeah, not going to.
So, building on that, let's switch gears a little bit. Um, One of the things that I've always admired about you, and you've taught me, is, and I always joke around about it as well, like you're always a few steps ahead of me, and like you have brought me along behind you with all these other systems. So, I've lived off your coattails and have followed all the programs you've been through. And one of the things that I think is brilliant about you as a coach is you've been able to take bits and pieces of all these different systems, the Evo, the FRC stuff and more, and build them into your new athlete program. Now, one of the biggest changes, I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but one of the biggest changes to new athlete has been USR.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was something that completely changed your trajectory. So let's dig into that, man. I know how passionate you are about it. I know how great a program it is. What got you involved with that, and how did that help you?
Well, I'll go back to how it became something that was even, in my wheelhouse. So I'd gone through UltraFit and I don't want to say I was getting bored with it, but it was like, I've already had multiple guys go to the NFL. I never had an NFL guy get drafted. I did in the CFL, XFL, UFL, USFL, all that. So, and that I became a pro strength coach also using those methodics. So it was almost like, well, what else is there really to attain? It's kind of rinse, wash, repeat with the same athletes, and you get bored with that. At least I was. But I think out of that boredom, it was because I was losing sight of why I was doing what I was doing. Kind of going through another cycle, not necessarily questioning who I was or what I was, but just allowing myself to get complacent. So from there, we tipped on to GOTA. And I know that you're very well versed in GOTA. So we started going down that wormhole, and we got certified, and everything was happening well. And I had almost gone out of business because in shifting away from UltraFit and going to GOTA, essentially what had happened was my guys were going, look, I'm moving better with more mobility than I've ever moved in my life, but I have no juice. And if you don't change back to what you were doing, sorry, but we're bouncing. And I actually had one of my extremely close athletes, who's a starting quarterback for Arizona State, Sam Levitt, called me up one day, and the phone call sucked because I trained his older brother. His older brother was in the league for 6-7 years, and he shouldn't have been, but he really truly took UltraFit to the nth degree and still does. If you were to train around him, you would think he's a maniac. And same with Sam, because they truly do understand that's the level that you have to train at to go to the ultimate level. So anyways, point being, Sam calls me up and he's like, I think I need to go and I need to try something else. It's nothing personal, but I need to go and do this for myself. And had he called me 10 years ago, I probably would have blew up on him. But, as I'm processing through my own garbage, and I'm, in and out of counseling, and my wife and I are healing stuff and we're working on stuff, you start to realize that if I'm holding that over the athlete, then I'm the problem. If I allow the athlete to go, dude, you got to make this decision on your own. It's your career, and you're going to have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So, where I'm going to be. If it doesn't work out, let's talk. So, I don't know what the time frame was, but, Sam bounced around to a couple different gyms and hits me up one day and he's like, yo, I'm back in, but I'm not doing GOTA stuff. Okay, that's cool. We can work around that. And so we go right back in, hit in UltraFit. I sneak in some GOTA stuff. And I'll get into why and, how that transpired. But anyways, point being is that he comes back in, we go crazy. He's now the starter at Arizona State. With all that being said, there are certain things that Sam does at another gym because he knows and feels like That's what I need to do from my standpoint of being a top level quarterback. Okay, great. So I have a choice with that. I can either put my foot in the sand and say, you're either doing all or nothing with me, and then I get all or nothing, or, hey, that's cool. Go do your thing. When you come over, let's go balls out, and we're going to do what we do. And that's honestly, I think that's where when you meet that athlete at their level, and I'm not trying to down talk what he's doing, but what I'm saying is you listen to what they're saying, allow them to have a little bit of freedom to go, hey, well, I really like this guy. He's got a couple things that you don't do, so that's why I'm over there. Okay, great, go do it. So then come back into what we're doing. So anyways, I'm digressing, but I'm back to your original question of how did I get onto USR? So I'm getting to a spot where I'm going away from UltraFit, going into go to 100%. I'm watching how the athletes are moving because they're very heavy on video. And then I start to see Les Spellman stuff. And as I'm watching Les do what he's doing, I'm like, you know what? That is a piece that I don't have. And I'm really having a hard time not drawing into it. And the thing is that UltraFit can train speed, but does not focus on speed. GOTA, it trains movements, it does not train speed. And I will take that to the grave. I don't care what an individual says. When in any GOTA session are you working on shin angle or speed as it pertains to moving from point A to point B? It doesn't mean they don't sprint, because I know they do, but it doesn't look at the finite parts of sprinting itself.
Well, I think it's also really difficult when it gets into the Evo system. Like, yes, it trains speed, but that's not what people perceive. You know,
Yeah.
it makes it
100%.
very difficult to communicate that.
100%. And back to Sam and Dallin Levitt, you have an individual like Dallin, and he went psychotic with this stuff because he felt like, okay, if I did that and I trusted you with telling me to go balls out and this is what I feel, then why would I do anything other? Why would I do it any different way than what you just told me to do it? And that's essentially what was a huge pivotal piece for him getting into the NFL. Well, same thing for Sam. But that's when you got to start to be able to go, okay, well, 90% of what I'm doing and executing, I'm going to use from a UltraFit standpoint. I'm then going to throw in my auxiliaries of mobility or whatever you want to call it. And it's still, it's basically me going to my toolbox and going, I have a star bit that I need for this star head screw, but it's only one bit and I only need it for that one screw. But it's very, very important because if I can't remove that one screw, I can't complete my project or I can't move on. So that's where I'm going to go, all right, well, let's dabble in some FRC because your hip is locked up and we need to get that opened up. Where, you know, I think to your point, John, is that UltraFit is an amazing system, but it's got its holes. GOTA is a really good system, but it's got its holes. USR is a great system, but it's got its holes in that you're not going to get strength training through USR. You can, but again, you'd have to go back to the individual that would just go balls out with it, but then it becomes counterproductive. And it's like, okay, well, there's a better and faster way to get strength than doing speed. There's a better way to get speed than just doing GOTA. There's a better way to get speed than just doing UltraFit. So then it's going, okay, well, I'm going to take the GOTA side of things from a diagnostic standpoint, and I'm going to find where the poor movement patterns are. And I'm speaking more to myself of what I use from that system. I'm going to use that as a diagnostics to go, well, no wonder you have knee pain and no wonder your back pain is there. Look at how you're moving. Now we need to go through our correctives to then get you to where now we can go into UltraFit. And then at the same time, once we start to get you out of pain, we're going to introduce the basics of USR. So it's almost like this rotating, I don't want to say a Rubik's Cube, but in a sense, I'm just going to interchange and I'm going to go, what do I need at the time? Boom, I switch it. The athlete needs this, do this. Once I see that there's a correction, we then move on. So the other thing too that I noticed is when I was going through stuff with Spellman and Les Spellman, for those that don't understand or didn't know what USR was, Les Spellman was the creator. So I'm going through and I'm watching video of elite sprinters. And elite sprinters are checking boxes of the movements that you would want to see in UltraFit and what you would want to see in GOTA. Now, that doesn't mean that, oh, well, he's moving that way, so just ignore all of that stuff. I'm not saying that. But the further that you get into that elite performance for that individual, you start checking characteristics of those movements that you would see in, say, an UltraFit or GOTA, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I had a tackle that came in from University of Washington, and knowing how that system is up there, it's pretty heavy in Olympic lifting, bench squat clean type stuff. Your typical lineman system that you're going to have lifting. And this guy was just wrecked his entire career. So what we did is we spent probably the first 3.5 to 4 months strictly on GOTA to correct a lot of those issues. And then as we were going along, we start phasing GOTA out and phasing UltraFit in. Or you take some of the GOTA principles from a movement standpoint, and then you adopt the UltraFit methodics of hold that for 5 minutes, or you're going to go hold it for 10 seconds, rep for 20, hold 10, rep 10, hold 10, rep 30, or whatever it ends up being. And now I'm getting the best of both worlds.
So now you see some of these patterns with Les Spellman and the USR, and you're like, all right, I'm in with this, and it works. Like, I guess, I mean, I have so many questions on where to go with this, and I don't really know where I want to go with it. I know how big of a role it plays with you. How did it change, I guess, how you actually implemented things like Evo Sport? You know, were you having to change frequencies and volume and all that stuff to help match the intensity that you would find with the USR programs?
So I'll go back again to kind of how, and I'll answer your question, but I'm going to circle back to kind of where it went to USR. So my 2016 draft class, I had a guy named Johnny Munt that was training with me out of University of Oregon, and he now plays for the Vikings. And about a month and a half into training, Johnny says, hey, I'm going to go down to Southern California. My quarterback is down there, and I'm going to train with this guy down there. No hard feelings, nothing, but I need to make this decision. And I'm pretty sure Johnny's a SoCal guy to begin with. I think his family has pretty big ties in the almond family, almond farms. So anyways, I'm like, okay, yeah, that sucks. Who are you training with? And that was the first time that I had heard Les Spellman's name. So seed planted, back in my mind, pound salt. I didn't like that he left. Now fast forward to where we were with our system at New Athlete. Guys are moving really, really well, but once we put any type of metric on them, they were not moving fast. They were not running fast outside of them just being an obnoxiously gifted athlete. So when I hit up Les and his people and I bought in, I didn't need to be convinced on, well, you could do this, but then you're going to have to change this system or that system. The beauty of being USR is Les goes, I don't care what you're doing in the weight room. Do something, but I don't care what it is. The speed system is a system in and of itself that really doesn't matter what you're doing in the weight room. Now, take that with a grain of salt, but if you're talking your general athletes, really what you're doing in the weight room does not matter as it pertains to speed, because most of the athletes don't understand how to put force into the ground. They don't understand how to use the ground to their advantage. And once you start to implement the USR principles, then, like I had 5 guys this past summer go from 18 miles an hour to 22.5, which is flying. However, so I'll say this with an asterisk, that's just the speed portion of what I did with Les. I also consulted with his people from a business standpoint. And if you culminate all of that, I believe it truly saved my business. because I was stagnated. I was really struggling with, how do we move to the next level type thing. And once we really started to consult with him, and I trusted the system, and then started to implement that on a weekly, daily, and also onboarding process, it changed everything.
Well, let me go back just very quickly to what we began talking about at the very beginning of this podcast, and that is, if this is where I will disagree with what you just said. You said it doesn't matter what you do in the weight room. Well, let's take that that athlete who's a 2 on the readiness scale. Well, they're not going to be ready to run or sprint either. Whereas that person who's a 7 on the readiness scale is probably going to be more inclined to get more out of any speed training that they do. So, that's where I do think that the strength training matters. If that person is just prepared, I guess if you will, from their from their from their strength training to be able to go and do whatever else. The type of training program that prepares the athlete to play their sport, to run faster, to do whatever. So that's my point is I think it does matter, but as long as that person is leaving their training, their strength training prepared, it doesn't matter what it is. So does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I agree with you on what you're saying as far as that 2 readiness versus the 7 readiness. But what I'm saying by it doesn't matter what you're doing in the weight room, it doesn't matter what system you're doing. You could be doing
Right.
conjugate, you could be doing West Side for Skinny Bastards, you could be doing Ultra Fit. I mean, you could be doing GOTA, you could whatever you wanted to do, you could do, because the speed is speed, and the speed system is, I would say, what you're getting initially is very general and it's very simplistic, but it's advanced. Um, Now, if you want to start tuning that finite knob to go, okay, Chris, you now have an objective to run this. Now, what we're doing in the weight room, yes, it does begin to matter quite a bit. So, what I'm saying is that, if you like BFS, bigger, faster, stronger, and you didn't want to deviate that, so in the eyes of USR, then don't deviate from it. We're not asking you to deviate. Where if you got into UltraFit, you didn't do certain movements because you bought into UltraFit and that's all you adhered to. If you got into GOTA, you didn't do other things. You did the system. And if you didn't do the system, then you were apparently the issue. So, that's my point. Hopefully that clarifies it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So you just became the director of the Northwestern region for USR. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. That's
Thank you.
awesome. So what? I guess kind of what's the next step for you for USR? I mean, where's all that going?
Well, USR is continuing to evolve, and again, it's I don't care what the system is. If you learn and master the system, you really don't need anything else technically. But that's a huge ask to stay in business. So what I mean by that is, John, if all you did was wear camouflage, like the jersey behind you, you're going to be fine. But eventually you're going to go, geez, I don't know about this, man. It's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. Eventually you're going to come across an individual or a case that goes, well, camouflage just isn't working. So then you got to shift. So to your question, USR is continuing to evolve as far as their platform is concerned. That makes it more user friendly. There's some other things that are coming down the pike that I don't know if I'm at liberty to say, so I'll wait for those to be released. But speed is continuing to grow, and the other thing that I love about USR is you don't have to be like that alpha over there that, oh, he's 4 stars, so let's put him on the GPS and let's see what he's doing. You could take the worst trained athlete, and if all you did was put him into the USR system, you're going to see a great result, and you have data to track it and prove that it actually works. Now, again, when you go back into that finite of, okay, Chris, you want to go from, where you are right now. Let's say you're, I don't know, a 2-star. And I know the 2-star, 3-star, 4-star stuff, I think it's kind of garbage, but whatever. Let's say that you want to play in college for football and you're a running back, but you're running 17 miles an hour. Well, we have a significant issue because 17 miles an hour is going to get walked down by everybody on the field. So, well, I don't want to train differently than what I'm doing. Okay. Well, I'm going to use the data from USR and our testing to prove to you that what you're doing in the weight room is not going to work for you. So that almost empowers me to go, okay, well, you started off and you're 10 to 20. Let's say your fly 10 with a 10 buildup was 1.51 seconds, which I think is around 15 to 16 miles an hour, somewhere around there. But I need you to get up to 20 minimum. And that's in a training standpoint, let alone with pads on. So we're going to continue testing, and we're going to continue to look at, okay, well, what happens if you do this? And what happens if you do that? That's where we're going to use the USR to go in and go, well, this is almost like the Omega Wave to go, what is your readiness? Well, what is your speed? What are you showing to me that you're actually capable of doing? And then we start making adjustments from there. Well, let's see what you look like on film. Well, I have really bad shin splints. Okay, now I'm going to put a new lens on. I'm going to look at you from this is just me speaking. I'm going to look at you from the GOTA lens. Well, no wonder why, because you're excessively heavy. You have no ankle control. You have no foot stability. Everything just blows up, and that you have an energy leak through your ankle, which then turns into an energy leak in your knees or whatever you want to call it. Now we can start to get a better picture of why your times are as slow as they are. So now we're going to make an adjustment. We make the adjustment. We go through, dose the athlete. Okay, let's go back and see what you're running. Well, I ran a 139. I feel like I was flying. Okay, we're starting to get somewhere. We've made some adjustments. Those adjustments have given us X, Y, and Z as a result. Let's keep going until we don't see that change, or at least that percentage of change. So we keep going. We're plateaued at a 133. Okay, now let's go back, see what we're doing in the weight room, make some adjustments. And to me, that's, I put up a video on our Instagram talking about a good practitioner knows what tool to grab and when they need to grab it. You can't just go to the hammer all the time. You can't just go to mobility all the time. Eventually, you're going to be put up against something where the mobility doesn't work, or it's time to make a change.
I want to make one statement here that I think's relevant, and then we'll get to kind of the closing side of this. Is, for the coaches out here listening that inevitably are going to say, this is idealistic. Like, I have to have control of the athlete or whatever, because that exists in our industry. This is actually happening in real time, guys. One of our frequent guests, David Buer, one of his big athletes is Elijah Holyfield. David Buer trains Evo style. And then Elijah, right, Chris, will do USR speed work with less.
Right.
Right? So, like, these types of things can be done. And, guys, for athletes out there, there are coaches out there like us, like Ryan, who are not possessive, that we want the best for you. And so I just felt like that was a very relevant point based on the stories that Ryan just shared. That, there are good-hearted coaches that want the best for you. And there are different people that provide value across the board.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point, John.
I just thought that was relevant.
Thanks.
I try every once in a while. I'll make a good one every once in a while.
I noticed with USR is that the egos just are not there. And it's not this, you have to do USR because you bought into us and you have to drink the Kool-Aid. Frankly,
it's good Kool-Aid, though. It really is good Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it is. When I bought into USR, GOTA kicked me out. And because apparently those two can't speak to each other, which to me is ridiculous, but, thanks, because you did me a favor. And, it is what it is. And I'm not going to, throw shade on them. I use their system. It's a great system. But it's like, it's not going to be my end all be all. And with the USR guys, what I noticed, especially with Les, and it really kind of took me back a little bit because I wasn't used to it. When he came up, he did a camp with me when we bought in. And he kind of starts asking me about competition. And I'm like, oh, well, this will be the same conversation that it typically is where, that guy over across town, he's a piece of garbage, and this guy over here and blah, blah, blah. It went nowhere with him. And I was like, I kind of didn't know what to do with that because he's all about positivity. And that was really weird because where I've come from, it's always ticky-tack. It's always, well, that guy does this and he's way different than us, so therefore he's an enemy. And when you start to remove that garbage and you start to go, yeah, he's a trainer. I really don't care what he does. I've got my stuff, and I'm not going to give him a second time to think about what he does because I'm so focused on what I'm doing that what he does doesn't matter. So that was as stupid as this sounds, and for as long as I've been doing this, it was a paradigm shift for me to no longer concern myself about what the other competition was doing. It doesn't mean I wasn't aware of what they're doing, but it was no longer like I'm going to go check their social media daily and I'm going to worry about what they're doing. And, oh my gosh, he's got that athlete and he's got this athlete. I gained nothing by doing that. So fast forward to you go down to the speed summit with Les, and you've got coaches that are just going, dude, I just want to get my guys faster. I really don't care about the guy across town. And all of what you typically would say or see in a strength conference of all the meatheads and the big dick swing contests that happen, it doesn't exist. It's not there. And if, that was my first introduction to Tony Holler, and I had a great conversation with him. You could probably go and compare and contrast resumes, but nobody cares. No one gives a shit because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But shifting your mind to go, holy crap, you got how many guys that run 25? What are you doing? I want to know. Instead of going, well, I got this guy in the NFL and I got that guy in the NFL. No one gives a shit.
And I'll second that with everything you said about USR. I fully support them. I think they have a great program. And, for those of you that don't know, Chris and I both have experience with USR, and everything Ryan says is true.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's
they
great
are. The egos are not there, and I think they
just
got
the
a great
training
product,
alone. Just the training alone, the videos online, it's fantastic.
Excellent.
It's ironically, it actually use a lot of Tony Holler stuff. So it's
so shout out to you guys. Yeah,
absolutely.
You guys want to sponsor the show? I'll consider it. But all right, so here we go, Ryan. Like last couple minutes, because I know you got to get going, and so does Chris here in a minute. If I can remember to do this, I always try to ask the guest, like, because the show is for the athlete, the parent, and the coach, right? Like, if you could just hand out one piece of general advice to families and to kids, what would you say?
Wow. Just one piece?
You can throw in a couple extra if you want. We've already dropped plenty of knowledge today.
Shoot. Do your homework on who you surround yourself with and what programs you get into. I think there's a lot of really, really good coaches that are out there, but I wouldn't necessarily get enamored with the names that go in to each gym. And don't necessarily get caught up in the contrasting or comparing yourself to that athlete across town. However, at some point, the higher you climb the ladder, you're going to have to compare and you're going to have to contrast. That's just the way it is. And that's how recruiting is. And that's how, the sports world is. But I think where a lot of kids get deterred is they go, well, I'm not anywhere near as fast as that guy, so I don't have a chance. Don't buy into that. Keep working, figure out a vision of why you're doing what you're doing and picture the end result and just go at it. But at the same time, if you've been doing a certain system and you've reached a plateau, maybe it's time to look at doing something different. That doesn't mean you don't come back to what you were doing, but maybe you need an adjustment.
It's a very good point. It's a great point. All right, man, where can people follow you? Where can they find you?
Newathlete.com if you're on the gram, New Athlete on Twitter, The New Athlete, THE. new athlete.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, again, I appreciate everything you have done for me. I am grateful for all of your guidance over the years, and thank you for coming back on the show, man.
Yeah,
It's great
thank you
to
for
catch
having
up.
me again. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you,
to
Ryan.
catch up, man.
We
Guys,
appreciate
that's the show. All right, you got value out of it. I know you did. Go share the show.